This plane called Air Force One landed in Beijing today. The man who stepped out onto the red carpet did something that almost no one noticed at first. Donald Trump arrived in the Chinese capital for the first time in almost 9 years. He is the first American president to make this trip since 2017, and he came not as the stronger partner in this relationship, but as the one asking for help. He brought with him a big group of top business leaders: Elon Musk from Tesla, Tim Cook from Apple, Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, Larry Fink from BlackRock, the leaders of Boeing, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, MasterCard, Cargill, and Blackstone. This was the biggest American business trip to China in a very long time. The picture was very clear. America is coming to Beijing, and America is bringing its money. Now, think about what that really means. 4 months ago, another world leader made the exact same trip. He landed in Beijing in January. He met with Xi Jinping at the Great Hall of the People. He signed a new strong partnership that covered energy, farming, climate work, and a goal to grow exports by 50% by the year 2030. That leader was Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada. While Carney was quietly building a relationship for Canada that looked toward the Pacific Ocean, Trump was on social media. He was threatening to put 100% taxes on any country that tried to work with China, including Canada. He even took away Canada's invitation to his group called the Board of Peace. This happened because Carney had warned about strong economic pressure at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Most news stories are treating these two events like separate stories that have nothing to do with each other, but they are connected. Over the next few minutes, I am going to show you exactly how Carney reached Beijing first, how he came home with a real agreement, how Trump is arriving now and needs the same kind of access, and what that quiet 4-month difference tells us about the new shape of power between Washington, Ottawa, and the Pacific area. Here is what really happened. Donald Trump arrived in Beijing on the evening of May 13, 2026, for a 2-day meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The visit was planned to last through May 15th. The official story from the White House called the trip a state visit of tremendous symbolic importance. There would be a welcome ceremony, a meeting with President Xi at the Great Hall of the People, a visit to the Temple of Heaven, a formal dinner, and all the usual steps of a successful American president meeting a big rival from a position of strength. That is the official story. The real situation tells a different story. This meeting was supposed to happen in March. It was delayed because of the war that the United States and Israel started against Iran on February 28th of this year. The Trump team thought that war would last only 4 to 6 weeks. We are now in the middle of May. The war is still going on. The Strait of Hormuz is blocked from 2 sides. World energy prices have gone up a lot. Gas prices at American gas stations have risen sharply, and Donald Trump's approval numbers have dropped to the lowest levels ever. So when Trump got on Air Force One on Tuesday, May 12th, he was not flying to Beijing as the strong superpower, bringing a partner who did not want to come. He was flying as a president who really needed a victory. The list of topics the White House prepared is very big: trade, Taiwan, artificial intelligence, the Iran war, rare earth materials, rules on computer chips, orders for Boeing planes, soybeans, beef, the case of Jimmy Lai, who is in jail in Hong Kong, and almost every difficult issue between the two countries packed into just 48 hours. This kind of list shows not strength, but a feeling of urgency. And then there is the group of people who came with him. The list looks like the best of American business. Tesla and SpaceX leader Elon Musk, even after their big public disagreement last year. Apple leader Tim Cook, on what is said to be his last big trip like this before he retires in September. NVIDIA leader Jensen Huang, who joined at the very last minute. BlackRock's Larry Fink, who handles about $11 trillion in money. Goldman Sachs's David Solomon. Boeing's Kelly Ortberg, who is trying to save plane sales after Beijing raised taxes on American goods to 125% last April. Citigroup, MasterCard, Cargill, Blackstone, Micron, Qualcomm, GE Aerospace. This is the largest business group a sitting American president has ever brought to China in modern times. Think about what that really means in real life. When a president travels with so many powerful business leaders, he is not making peace. He is selling access. The quiet message to Xi Jinping is simple: open your markets, buy our planes, remove the limits on rare earth materials, and in return, we will quietly make our blocking plans less strong. That is what is being offered. Not a big new overall plan, not a major breakthrough, just a business-style rescue mission for an American president who is losing support at home. Even the experts the government is talking to have lowered their hopes very low. The Council on Foreign Relations described the meeting, even before it started, as an effort to make the relationship steady instead of solving old problems. Kyle Chan from the Brookings Institution said it clearly. Both sides want stability. Both sides want to make the relationship okay again. No one is expecting big results. The Stimson Center's Dan Grazia added that Trump would at least try to get Xi to push Iran back to the talking table. Try. That is the word. The President of the United States is flying 12 hours just to try. Now compare all of that with what Canada just did. Because the timing matters more than almost any American news outlet has said. On January 13th of this year, exactly 4 months before Donald Trump's plane landed in Beijing, another plane was already landing there. It carried Prime Minister Mark Carney. It was the first visit by a Canadian Prime Minister to China since 2017, the same time gap that Trump is now trying to close. But Carney closed it first. He walked into the Great Hall of the People. He met with President Xi Jinping. He met with Premier Li Cheng. He met with Zhao Leiji, the chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. He met them not as someone begging, but as the leader of a G7 country that was carefully changing its foreign policy. And he came home with something real. Carney and Xi put out a joint statement that described a new Canada-China strong partnership. The main parts were clear. Energy cooperation, with both countries called energy superpowers, promising to grow investment in batteries, solar power, wind power, energy storage, clean technology, climate strength, farm food, and wood products. A clear goal to increase Canadian exports to China by 50% by 2030. Cultural exchanges, easier travel without visas for Canadians going to China, a special agreement with China Media Group before the 2026 FIFA World Cup, which Canada is helping host, and Beijing's support for Canada's plan to host the 2029 APEC Summit. There was more, the real, measurable, quick part. China agreed in principle to cut taxes on Canadian canola seed from about 85% down to about 15%. That is a $4 billion market for Canadian farmers. Canola meal, lobsters, crabs, and Canadian peas were taken off the punishment tax list. The total effect, according to the Prime Minister's office, was to open nearly $3 billion in new export orders for Canadian workers and businesses. $3 billion. Without starting any trade war. That is not just a trip for tourism. That is a big, real change. And it was the first time since the jailing of the so-called two Michaels, Canadian citizens held in China in 2018, that Ottawa and Beijing had started a new chapter at the top leader level. The Chinese official press called it the beginning of strategic independence for Canada. The English-language Global Times warned Ottawa not to fall back under Washington's control. Beijing's message was clear. They saw Carney's visit as Canada finally stepping out of America's shadow. And how did Washington answer? Within days of the deal, Donald Trump went on Truth Social. He wrote, "If Governor Carney thinks he is going to make Canada a stopping place for China to send goods into the United States, he is very wrong. He threatened 100% taxes on Canadian exports if Ottawa makes a deal with Beijing." He called Carney governor instead of prime minister in his own post. On the side at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Trump went even further. Carney had spoken and warned against economic pressure by the world's biggest powers. Trump's answer was, "Remember that, Mark, the next time you speak." And then he took away Canada's invitation to his Board of Peace, the new American-led group he had been pushing since January. Canada was out, punished for going to Beijing, punished for signing the canola deal, punished for the Prime Minister's speech in Davos. Now here is the part that almost no one on American cable news is willing to say clearly. 4 months after Trump publicly threatened to hurt Canada's economy for working with Beijing, Trump himself flew to Beijing, with Musk, with Cook, with Huang, with Fink, with the leaders of Boeing and Goldman Sachs and BlackRock, to ask Xi Jinping for trade access, to ask Xi Jinping for help on Iran, to ask Xi Jinping to buy American planes and American soybeans, to ask for the same kind of relationship that he had called a betrayal when Canada did it. The same kind of relationship that he said would be enough reason for 100% taxes on Canadian goods. And here is where the two stories come together in a way that should worry anyone watching how American power is working in 2026. The rules have changed. When Canada works with China, Washington calls it weakness. When America works with China, Washington calls it leadership. When Ottawa signs a canola deal worth $3 billion for farm exports, the American president threatens economic war. When Trump has not signed anything yet, brings the biggest American business group in modern history, and asks Beijing to help him out of a Middle Eastern war he started. That is called wise leadership in the official story. The numbers do not add up cleanly. Either working with China is okay, in which case Carney was right, and the Trump tax threats were wrong, or working with China is not okay, in which case Trump's own meeting with Xi this week is giving up. It cannot be both. And yet, that is exactly what the White House is now trying to defend. There is one rule for Washington and another rule for everyone else, including America's closest friend and biggest trading partner. Look at how Beijing is seeing this. Chinese official media has spent the week reminding everyone that Trump was the one who delayed the meeting because of the Iran war. Reminding everyone that Iran's foreign minister visited Beijing just last week. Reminding everyone that Vladimir Putin is expected to arrive in Beijing within days after Trump leaves. Reminding everyone, in short, that Beijing is the center of a new way of doing diplomacy, and that the American president is just one of several visitors coming through. And it is not just China. Look across the Pacific Ocean, look at Europe. American friends are changing their ideas about American promises right now. Japan and South Korea, who have seen the Trump team move military help from the Pacific to the Middle East. Germany and France, who have seen the Iran war continue longer than every Trump prediction. India, which has kept buying Russian oil during the fighting, even with American punishment threats. And Canada, which is now 4 months ahead of the United States in starting a new business relationship with the world's second biggest economy. You remember when people thought no big American friend would dare make its own deal with Beijing? That old thinking is gone. Carney did it in January. The Europeans are watching the canola deal carefully. Australia is rebuilding its own wine and barley trade with China. The wall that Washington spent many years building around Beijing now has many doors, and Canada was the first friend to walk through one. Think about the situation inside the United States. Trump's approval rating is at its lowest ever. Gas prices are up sharply because of the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. The Iran war is in its third month with no end in sight. The midterm elections are in November. The president needs real results. He needs pictures of business leaders shaking hands in the Great Hall of the People. He needs to announce Boeing plane orders. He needs soybean purchases to post on Truth Social. He needs Xi Jinping to give him help on Iran. That is the real truth behind all the ceremony. This is a presidency that has lost its strong position with enemies and is losing patience from the voters at home. Meanwhile, in Ottawa, Mark Carney has spent the 4 months since his Beijing trip building exactly the kind of position Canada has not had for a long time. A G7 leader with a working connection to Xi Jinping. A G7 leader with a multi-billion-dollar farm export deal already moving forward. A G7 leader who publicly warned the biggest powers against economic pressure and then survived their threats. A G7 leader who is co-hosting the FIFA World Cup this year and trying to host APEC in 2029 with clear Chinese support. And here's the question that neither government, neither Washington nor Beijing, is answering in public yet. What happens to Canada now? Because if Trump comes home from Beijing with any kind of deal, Boeing planes, soybeans, rare earths, or an Iran pressure agreement, then his earlier threats against Carney for doing the same thing become impossible to defend even in American politics. And if Trump comes home with nothing, then Carney's 4-month head start becomes the biggest diplomatic story of the year. Either way, the same answer. Canada understood the Pacific situation correctly. Washington is now trying to catch up. What comes next is the APEC leaders meeting in China later this year. Mark Carney has already said he will return to Beijing for that meeting. The same Beijing that Trump is visiting this week. The same Xi Jinping that Trump is meeting this week. The same Great Hall of the People. Carney will not be there as someone begging. He will be there as the Canadian Prime Minister who arrived first, who came home with a deal, and who stood strong when the American president called him governor. There is one more thing to watch. Trump has said he plans to talk about Taiwan with Xi. He has even suggested he may talk about American weapons sales to Taiwan, words that, if not handled carefully, could give Beijing exactly the diplomatic chance it has wanted for many years. Experts in Washington and Taipei are warning openly that the president's habit of speaking without notes could cost the United States its long-time unclear position on Taiwan. One wrong sentence spoken without planning in the wrong room could change the Taiwan question for a generation. Canada, importantly, stayed completely out of that talk. Carney's January trip did not mention Taiwan. He left that difficult issue alone because he understood that Canada's interests were in trade, not in getting caught in fights. That is the difference in how they approached it. One leader went to Beijing in January with a clear and focused plan, came home with a real deal, and refused to be pulled into big shows. The other leader has gone to Beijing in May with the largest business group in memory, an unfinished war behind him, falling poll numbers around him, and a dangerous Taiwan situation in front of him. One of those ways is leading. The other is just performing. And one last thing. Watch the Putin visit. Russia's president is expected to arrive in Beijing within days after Trump leaves. That is not by accident. That is Beijing reminding Washington that it has choices, that it has Russia, that it has Iran, that it has the global South, and that the American president, even with all the business planes at the Beijing airport this week, is only one partner among many. The world has stopped turning only around Washington, and the American president is, maybe for the first time, starting to feel it. If this story is telling you something you have not heard anywhere else, share it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear them. Like the video if you want more of this, and I will see you in the next one.